heroes. Night will fall in just a few moments. I hope you're ready. Blood. Someone should practice. Careful. My plants are fond of blood.
The sham.
I sense death within this place. Unto darkness. A worthwhile pursuit.
Spill their blood.
You will live.
The journey begins.
Hi there, Skipper with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Here with where I just about issues within the community, a little bit of history of how I got started with RogueDeckBuilder. Addressing some of the concerns of people that are on the other side of the spectrum, as well as people that I would consider on the same spectrum as I am, with the topic of net decking. Now, many of you may know that people like Travis Wu have done a video on net decking, or Desolator MTG has done or Desolator Magic has done one. Tasty Snackies has done a video on net decking. People have kind of outlined the pros and cons, and I thought I'd at least get my stance out there because I know it's a little bit ambiguous of where I stand on the topic of net decking. If you go over to my Facebook page, like right on the intro to the Facebook page is "Down with Net Decks." I mean, that's kind of a slogan that's been with Rogue Deck Builder, but I don't think that's the most genuine way to describe how I feel about net decking. So yeah, I'm titling this video "The Truth About Net Decking," and I guess it'd rather be the what is Kevin's opinion, what is the Rogue Deck Builder's opinion on the practice of net decking. So I've got my little cheat sheet here, and some dogs, oh, you can't see them there behind me, to help me out with this controversial subject. Was going to do a more like high production video with images and whatnot. Whatever, we'll just do a point and shoot with the webcam. So let me start with, some of you may know my history. I've done this many times throughout my YouTube channel. I've done kind of a Q&A of how I got started. Well, the very first thing with my Magic experience is I started Magic when I was in 5th grade. I remember my friend brought home some Magic cards and said, "Kevin, you have to check this out. You have to play this. It's fun." and we were hooked. We were hooked after we started killing each other with Crawworms and War Mammoths and all those type of cards. I remember when we figured out that Dark Ritual and Hypnotic Spectre was like the coolest first turn play you could do. And then we figured out later on that, well, Lightning Bolt takes care of that. So just as our game progressed, the more in depth we got to the game, the more we were addicted. I've been off and on with the game of Magic throughout my life. I know that I played it when the first time I went to college, right after high school, and then I played it again after, like, when I had a job where I had to commute from Salt Lake City to Warren every day, and instead of getting stuck in traffic, I would play at the local game store there. And during these periods, there's usually been like 4 years of when I didn't play Magic. But when I think the story really starts when, at least for the Rogue Deck Builder franchise or brand starts, is in 2013. But we'll back up there. So basically, throughout the history of my Magic the Gathering career, I've really respected creativity. It's not just Magic the Gathering, it is just my personality. But it would be a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever ist word it is, to think that my personality type is superior to other people's personality types. In the Myers-Briggs archetype of personality types, if you're not familiar with MBTI, just go Google it. There are 16 different personality types, and each personality type weighs different, what we call cognitive functions, higher than others. For example, I am an ENFP, and we weigh what is called the extroverted intuition very, very highly, and that's the creative outlet. That's finding possibilities and ideas in everything. So one idea leads to another idea. It's a domino effect. You start at point A, and pretty soon you're at point Z that might be completely unrelated, but we're grabbing ideas from every bit of stimulation that we can. And creativity is something we hold, in individuality, we hold very, very highly. So beyond Magic the Gathering, I'm that way in anything. Like, I have a swimming shirt on, for example. I'm always looking for new ways to coach, new different ideas or theories on how to swim more effectively, rather than stick to the tried, tested, and true results. It's just in my DNA to try to look for different paths to better yourself or better whatever you're trying to do. So even in StarCraft, I'd get very. I was known in StarCraft for having like rogue strategies. StarCraft 2, same thing. I didn't even look up kind of the equivalent of net decking, looking up strategy or build orders. I just jumped right into it and figured out my own. Dota 2, I get accused of. I'm the guy that plays Ogre Magi and gets Radiance. If anyone's familiar with Dota 2, I'm that cancer that will try these strategies that are just not the way that most people think is an acceptable way of doing something. So I make no apologies for that. It's just how I like to experience the world around me. And so my very first tournament that I was ever in as a little kid, I remember going up against getting Stasis locked and what was the other one? Winter Orb locked, and then Land Destruction locked. My very first tournament, I didn't even get to play the game of Magic. So right off the bat, I didn't really like this top tier aspect to Magic. I thought it was unfair. I didn't like uninteractive decks. And so there was a time in college that I remember I played during Psychotog as well. And Psychotog was like 85% of all decks. That's all you ran against was Psychotog. Sometimes you go against like the Arrogant Worm Circular Logic deck, but mainly it was the Psychotog deck. And I just absolutely hated Standard at that time. So at that point is when I swore off Standard. I actually quit playing Magic fairly after that, or just a few sets after that. And started back up in Mirrodin. And Mirrodin had the Arcbound Ravager nonsense. It was just really flooded with just the Arcbound Ravager deck. And that is when I swore off Standard, and I started to look at Draft as a format. And the reason I love Draft is because it was all about deck building. It was all about creativity. It was all about ingenuity, and I had a lot of fun. I got a very high rating. At one point, I think I was top 10 in the state of Utah for the DCI rating, and I was having a lot of fun just drafting. Well, drafting can be a bit expensive. I mean, it's like $10, $15 a pop every time you do it. Yes, you get cards out of it. Yes, you're a savvy trader. Or if you just, instead of take prize, take store credit. There's a way to reasonably play draft and have it be less expensive than Standard. But for me, it was a new experience. It was a new deck building experience every time you drafted. And the draft formats really didn't become that silly. You start to get like archetypes down, strategies down. It was fun. because it really depended on what was pulled out of those packs. And I thought it was a lot better than sealed because sealed is very lopsided, whoever has the best pool. But so I was primarily a drafter for the majority of my time until I started competing in standard. And the reason I started competing in standard was they got rid of the DCI rating. Now I didn't do anything with the DCI rating. It was just kind of my own way to progress my own growth and just to see how competitive I was against the field. But once they got rid of the DCI rating, I said, and went over to Planeswalker points, the vast majority of tournaments were standard. So I thought, well, I better get with the times. I better start actually playing standard. And that, I guess, leads me into kind of how Rogue Deck Builder got started. So I was at Grand Prix Salt Lake City 2013. And I played at a very casual store called Epic Puzzles and Games in Salt Lake City. They have a great story. They've retired since then. I know they sold the brand off to someone else, so Epic might not be the same thing it once was. In fact, one of my friends went up to play there and had some things to say about the new ownership. I hope he's wrong. I hope it's still a great place to play. But for him, it wasn't a very welcoming experience. And that was the welcoming experience is probably the hallmark of Epic Puzzles and Games. Everyone was very, very cordial to one another. We just all liked to play friendly games of Magic the Gathering. It wasn't very spiky at all. It wasn't very competitive. In fact, when I rejoined Magic and had no clue about anything, the metagame or anything, I became quite good in comparison to the rest of the group just because of my gaming experience and my experience with Magic the Gathering. And we had a great time. And I think Epic thrived because it was the only store in the Salt Lake area that really was friendly, yet still semi-competitive, yet still had at least a logical notion of what Magic the Gathering is supposed to be. And so I really was loyal to Epic Puzzles and Games. And we created a team. We played at the Grand Prix Salt Lake City 2013, where I had this crazy idea to pair Chancellor of the Tangle with Mana Dorks and Hero of Bladehold. So the whole idea of the deck was to get out at first turn, reveal a Chancellor of the Tangle to cheat another Birds of Paradise. So you could drop like an Avacyn Pilgrim and a Birds of Paradise on turn 1, and then turn 2 go for Hero Bladehold. And it was super good in the metagame at the time because Delver could not tempo that out, nor could the Inkmoth Nexus decks, it was called Kessig Wolfrun decks, could they Slagstorm in time before the Hero Bladehold or the Garrett got out of control. And so it was a very good deck against the field to try to compete against the top two decks, the tier 1 decks at the time. And I was playing the day before in a Grand Prix trial, or it was actually a Grand Prix, it was called a grinder, which you used to be able to get 3 buys from the day before a Grand Prix. And I was up, I think round 3 it was, I was up against a Kessig Wolfram player, and I got the Dream Scenario off game number 1, and he kind of shrugged it off his luck, and then game number 2, exact same thing happened. I revealed a Chancellor of the Tangle, I dropped 2 Mana Dorks, and I turned to a Hero Bladehold. My opponent was so just salty, just absolutely enraged, and he threw in his chair, like picked up his cards all hurriedly and slammed in his chair and looked at me and accused me of wasting his money and my money because my rogue deck will never win this tournament. And the prize support was so terrible that you were really just playing for those 3 buys. That was a whole reason to do a grinder. And I just shrugged it off. I'm like, whoa! This guy's out of control. I mean, Epic Puzzles and Games would get our net deckers every now and again, but again, it was more of a friendly environment. So I hadn't experienced this in a while since I'd chosen this friendly local game store, and it just, you never tell someone like me that I can't do something, right? I'll prove you. I'll go out of my way. If you want me to change my behavior, don't try to shame me, because then it will just make me like entrenched even more in what I'm doing. But I ended up winning the grinder. I believe it was a 6-round tournament. I think it was 32 or 64 man, and it was it was a 6-round tournament that I don't even think I dropped a game. Maybe dropped like 1 game during the entire thing, and then won my 3 buys and ended up doing very well in the Grand Prix. I think I went X and 3, so barely missed out on winning the Grand Prix, my very first Grand Prix. And then the next day there was a Star City Open, which I believe I took 11th out of over 300 participants with this Rogue strategy. So I knew Rogue was for me, and the guy just inspired the name Rogue. I never even heard that term of what they called like a Maverick type or a Against the Grain type deck, and it just is rolled off the tongue, Rogue Deck Builder. So there was my first, like, I don't know, I just wanted to be a
Admit it. You enjoy
different voice in the community and show people that it's okay. I just felt that there's other like-minded people out there that were deck builders first and players second, because that's what I get out of Magic the Gathering. I like to create decks first. That is my most enjoyment, and then I like to play them second. But I do like to compete. I was a huge StarCraft 1 player, very competitive, up to I cashed in tournaments, so that's how serious I was with StarCraft 1, before gaming was even really that big of a deal. So I'd go find these organized tournaments, and even online tournaments. We used to use a thing called, like, what was it called, battlereports.net, I believe, and there would be some cash tournaments in there every now and again, and I cashed in some of them, and I've just always loved competitive gaming, or just competition in general, whether it be sports, whether it be games. And so I am a very competitive player, so my brews do need to compete. And that's what I think sets me aside from a lot of people that are really against net decks. I think that Timmies are way more against net decks than I would say that Johnnies, which I consider myself. I actually consider myself a Johnny Spike. If you're going into the Mark Rosewater's demographics of Magic players. If you're unfamiliar with that, just Google the term Johnny Spike for MTG and get caught up on that. So, in short, Rogue Deck Builder was a response to the very heavy spike-infested environment, what I like to say, a very net-decking environment. And the pendulum, I think, sometimes swings the other way, where spikes or net-deckers get shamed for net-decking. And that's really what this is, now that we're into 13 minutes of this video, what this video is really addressing is I have no beefs with net decks. In fact, I will make the statement, there cannot be a Rogue deck without a net deck. There cannot be a healthy, competitive level of play without net deckings, without top decks. You go in anything, you go even in hockey, there's competitive strategies or ways to do stuff, and then you just have the coaches that will go against the grain and do different things, but their strategies could not exist if there wasn't a popular way of doing something. There is no sin, in my mind, to net deck. Now, I'm going to get into some criticisms of net decking in the future here, but I'm going to try my best as a Rogue Deck Builder to defend the practice of net decking and think that it's a necessary part, a healthy, not an unhealthy part of the game. Alrighty, so, anywho, so here are some reasons why to net deck. Number one, I think this is the most important one, is a lot of people like to say fake it till you make it, so you just do stuff, you go through the motions of doing something until you're good at doing something yourself. But I would say that if deck building is not your strength, which again I'm going to go back to that'd be very wrong or discriminatory of me to think that my personality type that values creativity over anything else is better than someone else's personality type that does not. And so there will be, it's some people's natural strengths to use their creative muscle, other people's it's their natural strengths to follow instructions. I'm terrible at following instructions. That's something I wish I was better at doing. And if you're great at piloting something that already is like really fine-tuned, then go with your strength. Maybe it shouldn't be your cup of tea or even your focus to try to build decks. So definitely, if deck building is not your strength, net deck. Do it. Number two, it makes sense in a competition setting. It really makes sense to go with what's best. Are you going to drive the best car or drive an inferior car that is, or an untested, unproven car? If you're going to race cars, for example, it's a lot of people play to win. That's kind of the Spike mentality. And again, I consider myself a Johnny Spike, not like a full-hearted Johnny who just wants to express their creative muscle. I want to compete at the highest level. I want to prove myself. I want to win. And I think that's the beauty of competition. So in a competitive sense, that makes sense to play the best thing that is available. So absolutely, go out and play the U-White Flash or the Aetherworks Marvel. It still does take creativity to play properly, at least a good sense of the game, and it still will test your competitive level. And the last one, which I think is very, 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 very underrated and ignored, is some net decks are extremely fun to play. If you like the deck, why not play it? A net deck had to start from somewhere. At one point it had to be a rogue deck or a new deck. And some of them are really fun to play, some of them are really cool to play. there have been in standard past decks that I've absolutely loved to pilot. I really like the red-green,
More fertilizer.
well, blue-white heroic was a fun deck that I used to love to pilot back during Theros, and I also like red-green monsters. Those are both kind of my play style, and I love to actually expand upon them. Now, I'm the type of person that will take a net deck and basically bastardize it, just try to go my own route with it. But a lot of them have been my play style. There are a lot of the aristocrat type variant decks are my play style, and I do like to play them. And just because someone else thought them up before me does not mean that I'm going to completely shun them. So I think those are some very good reasons to net deck. And I think I want to basically offer my differing point of view of it's cheating to net deck. I think that's a very, very poor excuse. Again, anyone is going to use whatever's available to them to try to give themselves the best benefit of winning, of competing. And having internet, having lists that have already been proven them, having access to information, I have been one of the most critical voices of Wizards by suppressing information. When they told MTG Goldfish not to publish all the results that they were getting from a bot, what was happening was a bot was scanning all the results from every tournament and publishing them, and they're able to do these insane breakdowns of like down to the decimal of how a deck fares against another deck. Just the statistics was awesome, and Wizards thought that was bad for the game. I thought that was incredibly good for the game, because the more information the better, the more it actually allows people like me to fight against the metagame. So I think that saying this is cheating is absolutely just bogus, just ridiculous argument. And people that do net deck should not be shunned, should not be told they are wrong by rogue deckers, should not have... I'm sick of seeing all the screenshots that Spikes take of rogues saying like, "Oh, good job, you net decking scum, you know, they just insult. And yes, and sometimes in the past I've been kind of caught up in the insult for net decking. I get kind of upset with their particular individuals at my store that have never built a deck on their own in their entire life. And it's just frustrating to me because I wish that they would use some creative muscle. It's why they're so bad at draft and sealed, is because they can't think outside the box whatsoever. They're only good at piloting. But I mean, who am I really to judge them for doing it? So this is something I'm trying to get better at, and I'm guilty of the past of trying of kind of reciprocating that shame. But I know exactly what it's like to be, and we'll talk about that in part 2, if we'll ever get to it in time, about what I think there's a big difference between net decking and what I like to call the spike mentality, or kind of the new, I want to see oligarchy of Magic, or the acceptable way, their high society, their way to do things. And we'll talk about how I think that's different than net decking in a second. But first of all, here are some of my criticisms against net deck. I think it stifles creativity. I think that if you're both, and most pros actually do help at least contribute in building new decks and testing them. So they are still using their creativity to fine-tune them. And so, if you just continue to net deck and net deck and net deck, I think that you're doing yourself a huge disservice in your own growth as a competitive player. I do not think, I'm going to repeat this, I do not think it is possible for someone to get to that top tier level by net decking alone. I think that they will have to, well, first of all, the draft portion is 3 rounds of every Pro Tour, and you have to get past that, otherwise you're going to get pared down into oblivion. It's going to be hard, it's such an uphill battle if you're going to suck it up during draft. And drafting does cause that creative outlet. There's a reason why at my local game store there's no one even close to me at sealed and draft. If we go into the competitive or the constructed, I would say I lose just as many as I win even at my local game store, just because I feel like I have a disadvantage going against the people. I'm playing a fresh new brew every game. They're playing a tried, tested, and true deck. Anyway, number 2, deck building, in my opinion, is half the fun. And I think that people that might not have just gone from taking a deck off the internet over and over and over are missing out on the fun and the excitement of creating something on your own. It's the same thing like taking a Lego set and instead of following the instructions perfectly, building your own Lego as a kid. I never followed instructions as a kid. I built my own castles and my own contraptions and whatnot. And that was what was fun to me. So I think people are missing out on the excitement and the entertainment portion of deck building. Number 3, which goes with number 1, is you get to see different angles, and it's challenging. So you are still exercising your competitive muscles by coming up with a new idea on your own. And the last one I think was the most important. What I would have a big criticism going against net decking is it becomes stale. I think that some metagames have not been solved. I think Theros was pretty much solved, but Return to Ravnica Innistrad I think was a good time because the metagame I felt even right before it rotated was not solved. That people were still finding better ways to build decks. And I do think we do have a good balance though. We saw this with this last. It took a while to solve the Kaladesh. Now people might disagree with me, but I would say up at about 2 or 3 weeks before the bannings were announced, that I think finally the metagame had been defined with U-White Flash and the Aethersworks Marble. But beyond that, I think there was plenty of options with creativity throughout the Kaladesh Standard season. We saw tons of decks at the Pro Tour, and so I think this is a pretty good environment to get into as a rogue decker. I do like metagames, though, that can be attacked. And I think this last one with UI Flash and Aetherworks Marvel was a bit hostile to play anything but those particular strategies, hence why they banned some cards, which I think is a good move for Wizards going forward, which I think is actually going to stifle net decking for years to come if they have this huge stance on they're going to ban cards or strategies that are overrated. So I think it's getting better. I started when rogue decking was completely a sin. It was a bad thing. You were shunned, you were disgraced, you were told you're a horrible awful human being, you're wasting people's money, why are you competing, you're a scrub, don't do it. And we've come to almost where I think we've done a full circle to where it's, or at least the exact opposite of the end of the spectrum, where Timmy's and Johnny's just completely insult and belittle and degrade Spikes for daring to just do what makes sense, use the competitive edge to their advantage. Now on to part 2, and I'm going to get through this as quickly as possible so I don't bore you to death, is I want to reiterate, I think a lot of people, what they have problems with net decking is not net decking. They have problems with the intolerable snobs that we call the Spike mentality. Now, not all Spikes are like this, but the vast majority of Spikes that I have met have been so frustratingly intolerable that they make a lot of people, myself included, quit competitive Magic at one point in time. Now, what are these intolerable snobs? They're the gotcha Magic players, the ones that try to get you tongue-twisted or saying, oh, you're trying to say, oh, we're in this phase, no, we're in this phase, oh, you missed your trigger, missed this, missed that. They're the rules lawyers, people that, again, try to say, oh, that was done, you said something in between saying this, so therefore you missed the opportunity to do this. The angle shooters, trying to find any way that they can find a ethical or unethical, let's not even debate ethics here, legal. If it's legal, they will shoot that angle. Then the stallers, the ones that game the system. One of the things that drove me nuts in my local game stores, we have people that are always trying to split prizes or trying to like do concede to each other or draw to each other just so they can get a better edge at the prize. We've actually kiboshed this in my local game store. How we actually pay out prizes based upon percentage of points rather than on placement. So say that someone has 12 points, both people have 12 points, and they're playing for 15 points. So therefore, if they were to draw, they'd only get 13 points each rather than 15 and 12. So 13 plus 13 is 26, 15 plus 12 is 27. So that's actually their disadvantage. They'd get less prize paid out because of that 1 point that's on the line. And it might not be that big of a deal, but it makes it so those people that are